Hello, everybody. My name is Soda,
And I'm Kale Mary.
and welcome to another episode of our podcast. And today we are reviewing, finally, Strange New Worlds, Season 1.
That's right. Soda and I took the opportunity to watch the full season of Strange New Worlds. We have already reviewed the first two episodes in kind of detail, but now we're just going to kind of take a step back. We're going to look at the bigger picture of the season, talk about maybe some character arcs and plots and villains and probably our favorite episodes and our least favorite episodes.
Yeah, and our favorite characters so far, and just generally, how do we feel? How are we feeling about this show fitting into the Star Trek world?
Yes, exactly. We can talk about, or we will talk about maybe some changes to canon.
Maybe. We
Maybe.
shall see. Well, but me and you, Kelmer, we had different viewing experiences, right? I sort of started seeing this around the time it started airing, and I followed weekly more or less. And you kind of binge watched the whole thing, right?
Yes. So within the last week or so, sat myself down and carved out like 3 episodes a night and watched them through and took notes. And there was a point at which I did want to just like maybe watch all the way to the end, but I held myself back because I have a day job and I needed some sleep.
Yeah.
But I will say there were points at where the episodes are not a unusual length, right? Maybe
No.
50-ish minutes. Take out, there's no commercials or anything if you're streaming.
Yeah.
And some of them felt really quick, and then some of them, like maybe the last episode, I think was an actual hour, somehow felt so much longer.
But when you say it felt longer, I didn't feel like any episode was like, taking its time and
Dragging.
just kind of dragging. Yeah.
Yeah,
It some of the episodes feel longer because they pack in so much.
very true.
Yeah.
Um, very true. Yeah, they do pack in quite a lot, and yeah, I will say overall I enjoyed the experience. So I would be interested to know, Soda, how did you feel like just getting one episode at a time and then having to wait a week?
Well, I think this show is kind of different from the other modern Star Trek shows in that it's episodic. You don't like there aren't any dangling plot threads. There aren't any like mysteries at the end of the episode that you want to get to the next one to find out the solution. It's so it wasn't like a feeling of oh, I have to see the next one to know what happens next. It was more like I enjoyed this show. I enjoyed this being in this world. I kind of want to see the characters again. I feel like I like them. I want to see more of them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I kind of enjoyed. I kind of enjoy the episodic nature, and I enjoy watching like an episode a week. I'm kind of grateful that it wasn't just released all at once.
Can I say there is one thing I found strange, and that was the recap.
Yeah.
Because when you're doing an episodic type of show, you don't necessarily have to tell people what happened before. I guess it'll at a certain point, there were self-contained stories in each episode, but there were sort of subplot threads that occasionally popped up again in episodes down the road, and they reminded you that that was coming by doing the episode recaps. So there was a point where I was watching an episode, it might have even been the last, I think it was the last one, where they're dealing with an issue that was presented in the very first episode, and it almost made me forget for a second that it was an episodic series.
Yeah, that's true. I think Strange New Worlds kind of took a leaf out of the book of Deep Space Nine in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's episodic, but there are plot lines.
Yeah.
it managed to keep like pretty good balance. But yeah, I agree. There are some plot lines that return, and the recaps are kind of weird because they kind of tell you, when you see the recap and you see the scenes that have to do with this plot line, you kind of go, oh, so we are going back to that now.
Yeah.
We're going to see it, and I think it does kind of like take away from the experience, actually.
Yes. At a certain point, I when I saw it come up, I hit the skip button. Skip the recap because I
Yeah,
went I don't need you to remind me like what could be coming. I kind of want to be surprised.
exactly. I completely agree with you. Um, I also kind of don't like it. I think, like, especially now, maybe in the era where shows aired on TV and you didn't have streaming,
Yeah.
you had to do recaps because, otherwise, how are people going to go back and watch, the relevant parts of the previous episodes?
Hmm.
But the entire show is up on streaming, so, you don't have to put up a recap. If someone wants, they can go back to the episode and watch the relevant parts.
Well, it was sort of a spoiler that I didn't really want because it would
Yeah,
remind you that either a plot thread was coming back or a character was coming back,
yeah,
and you then kind of had to mentally prepare yourself for like that's sort of what you're going to get. But then that can't be the complete focus of the episode because it is episodic and there's going to be some sort of external problem going on or situation or they're on a mission doing something and it goes awry, like the usual formula.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I completely agree.
Okay.
I think, I always said, one of the main flaws of the modern era of Star Trek is that overarching plot that we get all the time now in Discovery, in Picard.
Yeah.
We have usually it's not just an overarching plot; it's also an overarching plot where the way the future of the universe depends on the crew solving something. And traditionally, that's not what Star Trek has been about. And often I felt those seasons that relied on those kind of plots just kind of felt very rushed and not properly paced. And I'm just glad we finally get a live action series that kind of lets go of it.
Hmm.
And there are there are plots and there are threats, but none of them are like universe ending.
Right. They're definitely well, they might be universe altering.
Well,
We'll talk about that later.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but I agree. Really, the other type of storytelling where you have the overarching theme, especially when you have a return show like Picard, where you already have a lot of characters that are known, and they just sort of assume you understand what their character is like who they are. You understand their characterization, and they don't might not spend as much time on their developing their character arc in that moment. Whereas we get a show like Strange New Worlds, and it's all about really the characters and who they are, especially in the first season. Yeah, just who's the bridge crew and who are these people that are on the Enterprise under Captain Pike.
yeah. But well, if we're already talking about that,
Yeah.
it does bring up one of my issues with the show. I first of all, I want to say I really enjoyed the show. Yeah. Um, but it does annoy me that almost all of the characters are characters like have appeared in the past.
Yeah.
I think that aside from Hammer, the chief engineer, they all appeared in the past. None of them are original.
Actually, it makes your brain work a little harder because and we talked about this before, you sort of know where those characters end up in the future.
I mean, part of it is true. I mean, there are characters like, say, Ortega's, who only appeared in the script of the pilot. Yeah, we don't see them on
Right,
screen
right.
ever.
But I'm talking about the ones like Uhura and,
Yeah, but apart from that, I'm just kind of really frustrated with New Trek's inability. or unwillingness to, try to stand on its own 2 feet.
Yeah.
Almost every show, apart from really the only one I can think of that doesn't do it is Lower Decks that we talked about, and probably Prodigy that I haven't had the opportunity to watch yet. But even that includes like a hologram of Janeway, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It
but
does.
but
Yes.
yeah, but so apart from Lower Decks, every show has at least one main character who is a character in a past show, or a character who is related to a character in the past show, like Michael Burnham being Spock's sister.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm just, I just really wish we had a show that has a brand new cast with brand new characters that have nothing to do with the original series or the next generation. Just a completely new cast. That's the kind of show Star Trek has done in the past. And it worked, and I'm really frustrated by the fact that they're not willing to take this chance anymore.
It raises all kinds of questions. Is it because they don't feel they can retain the viewers if they don't put in something that's recognizable as far as like beloved characters um or using some of the material they already had? Are they just taking the easy way out? Is it to make sure that the show gets produced? Like the executives won't let them produce the show unless they like say, "Well, yes, we put Spock in this, and so we know people will watch it."
Yeah,
I mean, we don't know those answers, but I agree. Trek has proven many times you can basically take like a almost a full cast of brand new characters and people will grow to love them as long as you do them justice.
yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, I'm just, it's really frustrating, and even more frustrating is that the show is so good because it is going to be successful because it has such a strong writing, and it does, it goes back to being episodic, which is what we've said we've wanted for a long time, and it's going to be successful because of that. And I'm afraid that the executives are going to get the wrong idea that it's successful because all of the cast are already established characters.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree, this is like a grievance of mine as well. I do just want like new fresh characters, even characters that maybe more so reflect the values of viewers today,
yeah,
right? But my other grievance is I know Strange New Worlds is set before the original series. You're going to have to sort of try to fit it into the canon Prime universe. You're going to be using some of the same, you're going to use a lot of the same material,
yeah.
but you don't have to like reenact episodes of other shows or kind of like rewrite the book on some things. I just felt like at certain points it went a little too far to like rehash something that is already done.
I'm guessing about what you're talking about,
Yeah.
but we'll talk more about
Yeah.
individual episodes later.
And I didn't realize, I mean, there's been like little hints of it along in the series, and something's like, oh yeah, they're in the Galileo shuttle. That doesn't bother me. But then at a certain point, I didn't realize that it really did bother me until the last episode, I think.
Yeah, yeah,
And again, I want them to do brand new things, even if they're characters we already know.
yeah,
And I know they're going to be sort of on a journey that leads them maybe to their selves under the original series, if some of them are going that way. I get that you kind of like have to move them along, but they don't have to get there immediately. And a lot of other things could happen to them that we should be able to see.
yeah.
So
That's true.
I still think there's room there for them to be original, and yeah, and at some points I don't feel like if it doesn't feel like they're pushing enough for originality, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed the show, but I also think it should strive to be more original. And the
Yeah.
problem is, I don't know how much it can strive for it.
Yeah. And like you said, they might kind of written themselves into a corner
Yeah,
with bringing back a lot of well-known characters.
yeah. Do you want to go episode by episode?
Yeah, we can do that. Let's do that.
All right. Since you already talked about the first two episodes, do you want to skip right through episode 3?
Yes, the
Yeah,
ghost of Illyria.
Illyria, yeah.
Illyria.
So this was an interesting one. We got to know about new species, the Illyrians, who believed in a lot of genetic manipulation. They meddled with your own genes to create, the perfect Illyrian, shall we say.
Yeah, they've made a point of saying that at this point in time, the Federation has like anti-genetic modification law.
Yeah, we already know about that from Deep Space Nine. Kind of delved into it. It was still in place in the 24th century.
Yeah,
Um, because because of a war that we learned about in the original series. In the past of the Star Trek universe, there was a third world war that involved a lot of genetic manipulation. People created basically genetically created the superhumans who kind of went crazy and tried to take over the world. And Khan was one of them. And yeah, basically we all humans just decided that generally, unless it's about fixing, deadly genetic diseases, genes shouldn't be meddled with. And when these Illyrians wanted to join the Federation forbade them for this
yes.
exact reason.
So this is interesting, and I think maybe this is a trend we see in other episodes. You're following two sets of the crew.
Yeah,
So you're following Pike and Spock, who get stranded on the planet due to an ion storm. Woohoo!
yeah,
And then everybody else, the rest of the landing party made it back to the ship, but they brought with them basically kind of like, I mean, I guess we could call it like a space disease
yeah,
that didn't get caught by the biofilters in the transporter when it should have. And so people start in the ship, what starts with the landing party, they start being really attracted to light to the point that they harm themselves in order to actually like burn themselves with or almost blind themselves with too much light. And they don't know how it's spreading, but more and more people are getting sick. And it turns out that number one seems to be immune, and they don't know why.
yeah. Basically, Pike and Spock on the planet are kind of looking at the records of the Illyrian who live there and are kind of learning the history of the Illyrians. Meanwhile, on the ship, they are kind of dealing with this disease. So, of course, because it's smart writing, those stories kind of meet when we learn eventually that number one is immune because she's actually an Illyrian.
Yeah.
And because she's genetically modified, she is immune to most diseases. And so they use her blood, or I don't actually know something about her. They use her genes to replicate a cure. In the process of doing that, she exposes herself as an Illyrian, that is, as an illegal person serving
Hmm.
Starfleet.
And this is the point at which we get it confirmed that Leon is, in fact, like a descendant of Khan Noonien
Khan.
Singh. And she has been bullied in the past for it. And so that appears something that, Una and she have in common, even though Leon learns for the first time that Una actually is genetically modified.
Yeah. Leanne has very strong feelings about the genetically modified because of her
Yeah.
family history.
She's actually
Um,
very anti that.
yeah,
It seems.
yeah, it seems so. And of course, because Una helps, solve the crisis, Pike kind of agrees to keep the fact that she's an Illyrian under wraps, keep it a secret so she won't get kicked out of Starfleet. But it does raise, I think it does something very smart at the end of the episode that, Una kind of, she records her own logs and she kind of wonders what if I hadn't helped? Like, what if my special biology wasn't like a special, wasn't helpful,
Right.
and they still found out that I was Illyrian? Would I be kicked out? Am I only good because because I was helpful?
Yeah, exactly.
She is a good officer in general, but
Hmm.
why does she have to be special to be considered, for Starfleet?
True. The other thing in here is we're introduced to Mbinga's secret,
Yeah,
which is that he has a daughter who is terminally ill, and while he's researching her cure, he keeps her in basically in the buffer, which means that
in the buffer of
her
the
life pattern is
transporter.
kept in the medical
Yeah,
transporter that's part of his office. So Una discovers this in the course of figuring out how did the ship get contaminated. So she's the one who's privy to his secret, but no one else knows.
yeah. So it's an episode about secrets all around.
I have to say, Soda, really quickly, like, it didn't occur to me until a little bit later that I went, oh, a chief medical officer with a daughter. Hasn't this always been a contention of whether Dr. Leonard McCoy has a daughter?
Yeah, but I
uh,
think the main difference is that McCoy's daughter, even in the parts where she kind of hinted to exist, she's hinted to be an adult.
she like does exist, but
Yeah.
it's just I just somehow made that connection. Look, another chief medical officer with a daughter. Except this time we get to meet her.
I mean, Flux also has kids.
Yeah. Oh, one other thing here. Years ago, I did some research on number one on Una, and well, that's where I learned like she could possibly have the name Una. It was
Yeah.
kind of given to her, I think, in a canon novel. People just ran with it. And I remember doing some research to figure out where did number one come from, like what kind of species was she. Actually, kind of what I came up with, I thought she was like there was some maybe fanon or something in a novel that maybe alluded to her being like close to a betazoid.
It, it sounds like something that people would say because
Yeah.
Majel Barrett, who played her in the pilot, also played, Loxana in The Next Generation, who is a Betazoid.
Yeah. My point is I don't think it was ever stated like specifically where like what her race was.
No.
Other than I don't think she was fully human, and so I find it interesting that they've like made her a superhuman now, not a superhumanoid,
Yeah.
basically. Yeah, that was an interesting twist I didn't expect.
It is an interesting twist, and I am genuinely curious to see where they go. That because, as we would like to discuss, they do go someplace with it.
Yeah.
Okay, so next episode, Memento Mori.
Yep. Okay, so it is Starfleet Remembrance Day. There's an actual
Yeah.
holiday. Look at that.
Yeah.
It's a time where you honor people lost to the job. Um,
Mhm.
it turns out that oh, by the way, I just want to mention like this is the point at which we see Uhura gets to switch jobs. She's now in engineering.
Yeah.
So we'll, because remember, Uhura's a cadet, so she's going to get to rotate through the department. So we'll see her in different departments. Right now, she's in engineering with Hemmer, and she's being tested as to her knowledge and what she knows. Okay, so anyway, this is a on episode, is the way I remember this.
Yeah, that's true.
Because,
It's very much land
yeah, it's
focused.
very much lawn focused. Basically, where they get come across this.
They come across this abandoned ship, this kind of stranded ship. It's in need of assistance. It has people in it,
Yes.
but then it turns out to be a trap laid by the Gorn.
They're basically being pursued by the Gorn. So yeah, they realize they've fallen into a trap. They're being pursued by a ship. They decide to go into like close to this brown dwarf that's like got a black hole at the center. It's great. Um, so they're trying to get away from the Gorn ship. At a certain point, Leon and Spock separate, get on a shuttle and try to pull off this distraction, if you will, so that they can slingshot around the black hole. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And Leon, as you can see, Leon, as you would expect, is being triggered. She has basically PTSD from her experience being a captive of the Gorn. She thinks she knows like a way to help them get away from the Gorn, but it's kind of like her mind blocks her from getting there. So Spock mind meld with her, and then they figure out that the Gorn ships use light to communicate, and so she had a brother who helped her escape the planet. He died in the process, but he taught her like what is the code to that light. So she was able to, in a sense, knowing that the Gorns will kill anything that is weak, like to them, or anything that seems like a weak prey to them. And so she gets the two. There's actually two Gorn ships. She gets the big, I'd say like mother ship, the bigger ship, to
Mhm.
fire on the smaller one, and then they basically try to slingshot around the black hole to get away from the Gorn.
Yeah. I was going to say it reminds me of a cross between Obsession and Balance of Terror, because we
Yes.
do get a lot of the past, the crewman who was in trouble in the past. He encountered these alien enemies that not a lot of people have seen. They've killed a lot of people they know. They have a sort of obsession with them, but also we get a lot of action that is very reminiscent of old school
Yeah.
battleship fights, and lying in wait, not really seeing things. Everything is kind of on radar. You don't really see the other ships that much, and there's a lot of tension. Not a lot of action, but a lot of tension.
Yeah. And the one thing that stood out to me about this episode, we typically get like a self-contained story with like a moral of the story type episode.
Yeah,
This one, in a sense, just seems like they encounter a stranded ship and it turns out to be a trap, and they just try to get away from the enemy. Now that is like original series and other Trek show type episodes. You encounter an enemy, you try to get out of it without getting killed. At the end of the day, I really think it was just focused on La'an recognizing. I mean, she knows she's a survivor, but her just trying to wrestle with what happened to her and introduce the Gorn threat.
yeah. I think in this way it also reminds me of Balance of Terror, because Balance of Terror
Yeah.
also introduced the Romulans.
The whole point is like we've never seen a Gorn. We don't know what a
Yeah,
Gorn looks like, and
yeah,
they don't know what a Gorn looks like even at the end of this episode. It's just like suddenly you're introduced to this looming enemy out
yeah,
there that seems to be out there and appears to be very ruthless. And if you're
yeah,
to believe La'an, you don't want to ever come face to face with them.
yeah. They do build up the Gorn threat. Is very convincing. Like
Yeah.
throughout the season, even not just this episode. Every time we see the Gorn, they feel terrifying. You feel like they're an enemy you should fear.
Basically the kind you just never want to meet anywhere.
Yeah,
You never want to cross paths with them, is the way she puts it, because you won't survive.
yeah. They're different in the sense they're different from, say, the Klingons or the Romulans, in the sense that the Klingons and the Romulans seem more humanoid. You can talk with them, you can reason with them. The Gorn don't seem like you would be able to reason with them.
Yeah.
They're more like the Borg in that sense.
And you notice they can't even communicate with them.
Yeah,
Which usually when we have like introduced to the Romulans, the Klingons, whatever, there is some type of like dialogue going on, even if it's just posturing.
yeah,
Or I'm gonna kill you for the honor of destroying the Enterprise, whatever.
yeah,
there's still dialogue. It feels sort of like a monster movie type
yeah.
enemy.
That's true.
something
Yeah.
so foreign and so alien, and that you're not used to fighting against, and it's superior to you in the way it's a predator and you're a prey. So, and we get more of that later on in another episode, which we'll talk about.
Yeah. Yes. So this is Memento Mori. It's a very good episode, I think, to understanding Lan's character.
The other thing that stood out to me about this episode, beside the whole like terrifying Gorn introduction, Pike really trusts in his people.
Yeah, that's true.
He even has a conversation with La'an at a certain point that, you know, you can tell them like how terrible it would be to meet the Gorn and like give them the facts, but you still have to recognize that it's part of your job to like make it seem like we can there's still hope for us to win.
Yeah.
But regardless, you know, he really believes in his people, and we do continue to see that he has no problem trusting in his people to go out and pull off a very dangerous task, like, you know, flying a two-man shuttle.
Yeah,
I think we just get to see a little more about him as a captain, and that continues to go on through the season, and just like what his style is.
it's true. The next episode is Spock Amok, which, after the very heavy episode that was Memento Mori, Spock Amok is kind of a comedic episode. It's kind
Mm-hmm.
of a comic relief episode, and it does a good job, I think. It's a body swap episode. Uh, Spock's fiancée, T'Pring, comes to visit, and they do some sort of Vulcan ritual to understand each other better and end up swapping bodies. Meanwhile, Spock and Pike are kind of in the middle of negotiating with a new species that is basically totally empathic. That's how they describe it, I think.
Yeah.
And
Rogovan? Something like that?
something like that.
Yeah.
We never see them again, so yeah. Um, but yeah, they are totally empathic, and well, Spock is kind of very important to the negotiations, but currently T'Pring is in his body,
Yeah.
so that is kind of amusing. I actually really like the negotiation subplot because usually when you have empathic characters, they're portrayed very much like Deanna in The Next Generation. Like they are able to feel other people's feelings, and they're very dramatic about it.
Yeah. But
Yeah,
they're usually also not peaceful but helpful. They
helpful.
like to
Yeah,
assist others because they are empathetic to others in a
yeah,
much higher capacity. Um,
yeah,
but yeah, we get the sense that this race is not like that at all. In fact, it takes a lot to satisfy them in a negotiation. They have to talk to them several times.
yeah. This species is empathic in the way that they kind of mimic the mannerisms and the psychology of the people they
Yes.
negotiate with.
Yeah.
If they're When they negotiate with Tellarites, they're being very argumentative because Tellarites like to argue.
Mm-hmm.
When they negotiate with Vulcan, they're being very logical.
Yeah.
And when they negotiate with humans, they are being kind of, very optimistic because this is the Federation. But the thing is, when they negotiate, they use their empathy to see the point of view of the other side. What they're looking for is for another side that can see their point of view.
Yeah. Pike is the one who realizes this. He plays a hunch, as he says it, and takes their point of view, and they thank him for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they are convinced that basically what convinces them that the Federation is worthy of having an alliance with.
Right.
Yeah,
And you know that makes a whole lot of sense, because if you're a race who is at risk of not making the right decision for your own people because you are always so empathetic with others, that
mm-hmm.
you do need the other side to be able to balance it out
Yeah,
by seeing it
from
from
your
what
perspective.
you might really want, as in
Yeah,
and not allowing you to just kowtow to the other side, because you can't
yeah,
help yourself, because it's how you're genetically created. It's your
Yeah,
biology that makes you, in a sense, at risk to do that.
yeah. But this is the B story. The A story is, of course, about Spock and T'Pring.
Uh-huh.
And because the writing, like I said, the writing on this show is good. The stories kind of do have a parallel because T'Pring and Spock also don't really see eye to eye.
Yes.
They don't understand each other's needs. T'Pring is a little frustrated with Spock putting his work before her.
Spock is worried that T'Pring is not, accepting of him as himself, being that he doesn't really he's not really comfortable being full Vulcan or even
Yeah,
human. So he's struggling with that, and he doesn't think she understands that.
yeah. And so I think it does kind of afford them like a chance to see things from the other's perspective. I'm kind of glad that because they're Vulcans, they don't do the whole "let's first hide it, try to hide it, and act like each other." Like immediately when they're caught, like by Captain Pike, they're like they explain what's going on because you know
Right.
they're Vulcans. They're not going to lie.
There's really no logic in keeping that pretense up beyond a few
Yeah,
minutes because the situation was too serious and that Spock needed to go to the negotiations, but Spock couldn't go as into Pring's body.
yeah,
And the other part that we get to this episode is Spock seeks out some advice on how to just, deal with his relationship with T'Pring from Chapel.
true.
I think that's kind of what makes him think about doing this soul sharing ritual, which then, backfires and puts them in each other's bodies. Um, he, even after that, where T'Pring actually is called upon to do her job while Spock is in her body, he then again seeks out Chapel's help to, assist him in doing that because he doesn't want to mess up T'Pring's job either. She's taking the risk of trying to be him in the negotiations, and he certainly has to do his due diligence and in her work, which by the way we learn is she rehabilitates Vulcan criminals, or essentially what constitutes a Vulcan criminal, that is someone who has left the path of logic.
Yeah. I don't think it's just people who have left the path of logic. I think that there's people who did this and also did crimes. I don't think just
Right,
living the path of logic
right. But it could be
gets you jail on.
so she basically rehabilitates criminals
Yeah,
through logic.
yeah, through logic. But yeah, yeah, it is kind of nice to see them see things from each other's perspective. I think it's a nice conflict that is set up between them, especially when we know how they end up being.
Yeah.
It's kind of start to set them on that path. This is the first season out of what I suppose would be 7 seasons. So they have time until they get to the stage we see in, Amok Time.
Yeah.
So it's a nice slow starting point for that.
It is. Those are the major points. There's two sort of separate things that are going on at the same time, the negotiations and then Spock and T'Pring being in this body swap situation.
Yeah,
Um, and then we also get to see like Spock, in a sense, making a connection with Chapel and relying on her. We get to see Pike's like green wraparound shirt.
yeah,
But probably my favorite moment was like the opening of the episode where it feels like we're almost getting a reprisal of going back to a Mook time in the original series. There's like the Vulcan, like ritual place, and there's the gong and the bells and what looks like T'Pau. And then T'Pring, and it's
it's
really
a very good
it's a
recreation.
very good recreation, but it turns out it's Spock's nightmare where T'Pring again calls for Kali Fi and then makes him fight himself.
Yeah.
So he has interesting nightmares, I'll put it that way.
Well, yeah, we know he has
Yeah.
issues. We know.
This one actually, when I talked about earlier about, them like recreating some things and they don't need to do that, I actually enjoyed seeing the recreation of this scene. It made
Yeah,
me
that's true.
nostalgic.
And what did you think about their acting? Because we had Ethan Peck who plays Spock, plays T'Pring in Spock's body, and then we had T'Pring's actress playing Spock in T'Pring's body.
I actually thought they did pretty well. I mean, they
Me
essentially
too.
played it. They played someone in someone else's body who didn't know how to play the other person.
Yeah,
It was very entertaining.
yeah. And honestly, I thought they did a very good job.
Yeah, they did, and it's that kind of campiness that I like in Trek.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
So brownie points for the body swap.
Brownie points for the body swap. Um, this brings us to episode 6, Lift Us Where Suffering Cannot Reach. This episode is like straight out from the original series.
Yes.
It feels very original series. Basically, the Enterprise arrives at this planet who is very technologically advanced, but is not part of the Federation. And this planet has this ritual where they choose a child. It becomes like this very important figure in their culture, and they raise this child like they teach them a lot of things, and they spoil them, and they get like this very special treatment, and then there's a big ceremony.
At which they quote ascend.
Yeah.
For the better, for the all of Majalis, which is the name of this colony.
Yeah, yeah. The name of this planet is Majalis. Yeah. They call this child the first citizen, and
First servant.
his first servant.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And they basically elevated to like the most important person in the culture. And if this child, something happens to this child, the entire planet can be in ruin. And in our story, basically, when the Enterprise gets there, something happens. There are attempts on the child's life. There are attempts at kidnapping, which the Enterprise thwarts. Pike knows the leader of the planet from his past. They have some sort of a romantic history, I think.
Yes.
Yeah. And basically, in the story,
Pike saved
there's
her
this
once.
Pike saved Ross.
Yeah, he saved her before and then made an offer to her race to join the Federation, which they turned down.
The people on Majalis are convinced that the people who are after the first citizen, the first
servant,
the child, basically, are people from a nearby colony who are jealous of Majalis because Majalis is very technologically advanced. It's said to be even more technologically advanced than the Federation.
And also medically advanced because they have some bio implants in the first servant that don't even allows him to basically like self-heal as opposed to being treated when he is, concussed from being attacked.
Yeah. And because of that, it's very important to two characters. First of all, for Pike, because if he stays on Majalis, first of all, he has to leave the Federation for this, but if he stays on Majalis, he can escape the fate of, being in the beep chair.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's also important for M'Benga because Majalis could have a cure for his daughter.
Correct. But unfortunately for M'Benga, the doctor, the Magellan doctor who is overseeing the first servant says, like other races, we don't interfere with the advancement of other races, so we don't share our technology. Basically, we're not part of the Federation. You can't have this technology. That's what he says when M'Benga approaches him for possible cure for a patient who is terminally ill, which is his daughter.
So the Enterprise investigates what's going on, and of course, eventually they find out that the good guys are actually the ones trying to kidnap the first servant, because when the child ascends, when the first servant ascends, he's basically being led down to this weird child torture chair where somehow the child has to die so the entire civilization can thrive.
Yeah. It's
So
not explained very clearly. The Alora, who is, the woman that is infatuated with Pike,
yeah,
and the one who's overseeing the ascension of the first servant, she basically says if he does not ascend, or essentially we hook him up to this chair, torture chair, whatever, um, that all the cities that are in the sky, which you can see that at certain point, will fall out, and then the planet itself is like basically lava.
yeah,
So that's why their cities are above the surface. She doesn't explain how it would happen, just that, basically
yeah.
their cities would fall out of the sky and then they'd all die.
Yeah, the excuse is like their ancestors designed the system and they
Yeah.
haven't changed it since.
Exactly. It's a quote machine that keeps their cities running up there, and they don't know why it requires the mind of a child, only that it works best attached to the
Yeah,
mind of a child, and
yeah,
or the neural pathological ways of a child.
yeah,
So they don't know why they do it, just that they have to, and therefore they're accepting of that. But as you can
yeah,
imagine, when Pike realizes what's about to happen to the child, and that these adults are basically grooming this child to be tortured for however long he lives, and making him think that it's his duty to do that for the whole planet, Pike is horrified,
yeah,
as I think anyone would be. And he wants to save the kid, but at the same time, Laura reminds him, this is not your planet. We're not part of the Federation. And if you take him out of the machine now, he will die anyway.
yeah. And I think before they hook him up, I think he asks the kid if he wants to do it, and the kid says yes.
Yeah,
The kid knew the whole time what he was going to do.
right.
Yeah,
They do ask, but again, it's that whole grooming part.
yeah,
They've essentially
yeah,
groomed a child to accept that fate.
yeah,
So you really wouldn't expect him to say no.
yeah. Yeah, but they also the Allura kind of, in the best tradition of Star Trek, I don't think it makes a lot of scientific sense. Like you said,
Hmm.
there is no real reason that they require a child's mind for this. It does make you ask questions because Allura herself says, is your society, can you honestly say that your society thrives without the suffering of at least one child? And we know, maybe in the Federation you can argue it isn't, but in our modern world, can we say that? We
Yeah.
can't.
But are we specifically grooming children to suffer? Are they a victim of like circumstance of I don't I mean there's a serious argument there, I think.
There are
Um
serious arguments there. I mean, you can think about children who are poor in modern society. You can think about
yes.
children whose poverty in third world country holds up modern in Western countries. Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, it feels very much like an original series
Yes.
episode.
Yeah, it does. And the other thing is there's if you really take a step back, it's not a happy ending episode. It's just you're left with this planet who does this what seems like a terrible thing to a child on a regular basis. Pike has to walk away from it. The whole crew has to walk away from it, knowing that that's going on.
Yeah, and that they can't do anything about it.
Yeah, yeah. It's a very somber ending to that episode, I think.
Yeah,
But the city,
that's
the
true.
the the, the cities in the sky reminded me of the Cloud Minders.
Yeah, and it's a very similar episode that also had like this underclass that they were using
Yeah,
to keep their society functioning, but
yeah.
City in the Clouds had a more optimistic ending.
Hmm. And I don't think we mentioned it, but the one thing that like started to give away that maybe Majalis was not as might have a role to play or might be part of this conspiracy is that Prospect 7, the colony or the colonists that were trying to either kidnap the child, the first servant, or destroy him, turns out to be an offshoot of Majalis.
Yeah,
And it's people that purposely left the planet and the civilization because they don't necessarily agree with what they have to do to keep that civilization running. And so it's almost like
Yeah,
they're like a break off faction who is like, we don't agree with your philosophy and with what you do, and so they are always trying to save the next child that is to become the first servant. First servant.
yeah. A lot of people kind of compare this episode to the short story "Those Who Walked Away from Omulas," which
Yeah,
has very similar themes.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay, so number 7 is the Serene Squall.
the Serene Squall.
And it's the name of a
That's a
ship.
very special episode. Yeah,
Well, first off, we kind of open where we see like Spock and T'Pring are still having like conversations about their relationship. They're trying to spice things up a little bit, like through long distance communication. So they're trying to keep in touch with each other. And then we realize we have a third party on the ship. This a counselor, our former counselor who used to be part of Starfleet, called Dr. Aspen.
yeah.
And she is there to ask the Enterprise for assistance because there are some colonial ships that were attacked, 3 ships, and that are basically being chased down by like pirates, like Orion pirates, and they're afraid that the pirates will enslave the people on the ship, and so she asked the Enterprise to go help them out. And when they get there, it turns out like 2 of the ships are destroyed, and there's 1 ship left, and so they board the ship. They don't board the ship, but they go off to find the ship. Let me put it that way. They think it's in being pursued by the pirates, and so they're like, let's go rescue them. And then they come across the ship. An away team goes there to see if there's any like survivors, because it seems like there's nobody on the ship when they scan it, and it turns out to be a trap. So is actually the pirates are on the ship, and they take the away party as hostages, and at the same time invade the Enterprise. And so this is your classic invaders on the Enterprise, who manage to basically also capture the crew on the Enterprise. And then you have a few of the crew, like Spock, Dr. Aspen, who's with Spock, and Chapel, who have gotten away from the enemy and are trying to take back the ship. And at the same time, you also have, Pike and his party
trapped on the pirate ship.
Basically trapped on the pirate ship. Pike is, quote, being tortured, or let's say interrogated by the pirates. Well, Pike does what he does best, which is talk and cook. His two good qualities. So by doing that, he, in a sense, plants the seeds for a mutiny from the pirate crew against their leader. That is his plan to help his own people take over the pirate ship. So in the meantime, Spock and Chapel and Dr. Aspen are working to get back in control of the Enterprise, and it turns out that Dr. Aspen is a pirate in disguise. So she betrays Spock.
There was a real Dr. Aspen.
Yeah.
They basically, the pirate, whose name is Angel, took Dr. Aspen's identity.
Yeah. So she is actually Captain Angel of the pirates.
Dr. Aspen and Angel are treated as non-binary. They are a they, not a she.
Oh yeah, they.
They took Dr. Aspen's identity and to infiltrate the Enterprise and kind of work it from within. And they actually aimed to capture Spock so they could negotiate with Vulcan, because Angel, which is the pirate that took the identity of Dr. Aspen, has a Vulcan lover, right?
Yes, a Vulcan lover. A
Vulcan lover who is held in
the rehabilitation center.
The rehabilitation. Yeah, I said correction facility, but it's a rehabilitation facility where T'Pring works, and they think they could, convince T'Pring to release the prisoner in exchange for Spock. Spock, in response, pulls a very interesting trick by telling T'Pring that he no longer wants her and is instead in love with Nurse Chapel.
Yes.
Yeah, who's already hinted to have, feelings for him.
Mm-hmm.
The ruse works. T'Pring refuses to release the prisoner, and meanwhile, Pike and the rest of the crew on the pirate ship manage to temporarily take command of the pirate ship.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, because they started the mutiny against the captain, basically.
Yeah.
And Angel is defeated. Pike comes back to the ship. Everything is fine. And then at the last second, we get to see who's Angel's Vulcan boyfriend, basically.
Or who Spock suspects it is. So Spock suspects that it is his brother Cybok, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Angel, by the way, Angel escapes.
Angel escapes, yeah. Angel and the pirates escape. And let me tell you, I am so happy someone remembered Cybok exists.
I mean, they brought in, the other siblings, so why not bring back the one that people did know about from the movies?
From the bad movie, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, this is a very action-packed episode.
Yeah.
You've got two different teams of the crew working to fight against the invaders, and doing it in very different methods, but still they're all just pulling a ruse. At the end, they're tricking the enemy at the end of the day. We get to see like the Orion pirate.
Yeah. I mean, the pirates are kind of all over. They're not just
they're a mix, right? But there's the one that is left in charge. He's probably the second in command, since Captain
probably.
Angel is the one who actually was running the pirate group.
Yeah.
So he's an Orion, and he's left in charge, and obviously pirates.
Yeah, and he isn't a very good cook.
Oh, he's a terrible cook, which is ironically, I think, where Pike gets his idea. He's like, let's give your crew at least one good meal. I can cook for them. And, that's the point at which while he's cooking and they're just watching him, he gets to have this conversation with the second in command, who's got quite the ego. And he gives the second in command the idea that, hey, you know what you could do with us? You could give us to the Klingons, which, of course, is an extremely dangerous thing to do even for the pirates, because the Klingons is likely kill them even after the deal's done. Which Pike was betting that the rest of the crew didn't want to do because they don't want to deal with Klingons. So he really just makes the Orion pirate think like it's his idea. It's a great idea to do that. So that's how he starts the mutiny. Una seems to know what Pike is about because there appears to be some past episode where they pulled the same trick.
Past incident.
Yeah, so it's actually very funny. Except for watching Pike get punched in the face a few times. The whole on the pirate ship piece is very entertaining.
It's true.
The other thing is Dr. Aspen, or Captain Angel, really. They were very interesting as a character.
Yeah.
Because that switch in, when that deception was revealed, their change in just to this
in mannerisms,
cackling villain type personality was very hilarious to me.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you could see that they were very good at just in general deceiving everybody, giving them a sob story. Oh, we need help. Oh, seeming to know, giving it away almost that they seem to really know how to talk to a Vulcan.
Yeah.
They actually try to counsel Spock on, be a listening ear to Spock on why isn't he, he's half human. He's trying to determine if he, should be more Vulcan or more human. And they say, just be yourself. And then you kind of learn at the end, they have a good reason for that because they are or they are basically in love with the Cybok who has forsaken the Vulcan way.
Yeah.
It's very entertaining.
They are very entertaining. They're like very unique character.
Mm-hmm.
They do exude this, the kind of air that kind of signifies that they've had a lot of experience in life.
Yeah.
They seem to know what they're talking about, but um, at the same time, you kind of do get a feeling that something is up. They're
Oh,
not
yeah.
dressed like everyone else.
Yeah.
They kind of act a little weird, so they're kind of being marked as different. And then when you find out why, it all makes sense.
Yeah.
But yeah, they do a very good job of changing their mannerisms depending on what they're trying to convey and who they're talking to. It's a very interesting character. I would love to see them again.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah. Um, a very fun villain.
yeah,
It kind
definitely.
of reminded me of like a Harry Mudd, but better.
More likable, more likable than Harry Mudd, I think.
Yeah, as dramatic, but more intriguing,
Yeah,
being that they can put on disguises or disguise who they are so easily and get and convince people they're something they're not, to
yeah,
infiltrate. Very good
yeah.
spy.
Very good spot. The next episode is the Elysian Kingdom.
Oh, can I pause right here before we go to the next episode?
Yeah,
The thing about the end of this is Spock actually tells Chapel about his brother, Cybok.
yeah.
And I was thinking to myself, is this a retcon? Because
Um,
do we know if Chapel knew, like, in the
I don't.
movie?
I don't think Chapel was in the fifth movie, so I don't think it necessarily is a retcon.
Okay. So he just never told Kirk and McCoy.
Yeah, maybe, maybe.
Maybe. Okay.
Yeah,
I mean, because there was that sort of, I guess, impression that Spock never talked about his family, but we do in Strange New Worlds get to see that he has confided in Chapel that he does have a brother who, um, has left the Vulcan way and may in fact be that prisoner from the rehab center.
yeah. I think just Spock never talks about his family when it isn't relevant. So in this
Yeah.
case, it's kind of is.
Well, he didn't have to go to Chapel and confide into her, but it's another, I think, example of how he's become close to her.
Yeah, they are getting closer.
Yeah.
They're very good friends.
Okay.
All right, so the eighth episode, the Elysian Kingdom. This episode, I think this is one of the episodes where, like you mentioned, when we see the recap, we kind of know what it's going to be about.
Yeah.
Because this was very clearly about Dr. Mbenga and his daughter.
Mm-hmm.
So Dr. Mbenga reads this fairy tale story to his daughter about the Elysian Kingdom and all of the kind of tropey characters in it. We have the evil queen, the spoiled princess, we have the cowardly advisor, and the good king.
Who has to make a
Um,
hard choice?
who has to make a hard choice? There is the warrior in the forest, and the knight,
Wizards.
and the wizards. Yes, the bad wizard, the good wizard, and basically the Enterprise encounters an anomaly, which kind of makes the fairy tale come to real life on the Enterprise, with all of our main characters playing the parts, and no one aside from Benga and Chief Engineer Hammer kind of realizes that. Everyone kind of turns into a character without knowing it.
Yeah.
So we have Uhura playing the evil queen, and Captain Pike playing the cowardly wizard, the cowardly advisor, and and of course Mbenga himself is the good king.
um,
Um,
Spock is the bad wizard.
yeah,
Hemmer is the good wizard, or he's supposed to be.
yeah,
Una is the huntress. Ortegas is the
night,
knight.
right? Yeah,
Then we have the Mercury Stone, which is the special, let's say, magic or weapon that the Good King owns, that he's trying to protect, and that Queen Nev, who's the bad queen, wants to
yeah,
have control over. And
Yeah.
the Mercury Stone is, in a sense, Rukia, which is Mbinga's daughter.
Yeah. So this is kind of like a fun little episode for the most part. Like everybody's kind of playing a character. The Enterprise suddenly looks kind of like a cross between the Enterprise and the magical forest slash palace, I guess.
It very
Um,
much reminded me of the Shore Leave episode from the original series, where
Kind of, yeah,
every scene is very like fake and overdone to look like whatever fantasy it is that the person
yeah,
is into. Like you have a big fake rock looking thing in the middle of sick bay where Chapel, who is sort of, I guess, what is she supposed to be, like
a healer
the
of some
healer?
sort, I
Yeah,
guess. Yeah,
where it looks like she might be doing some rudimentary like healing, but then you
yeah,
have
like making
all
potions.
the actual like modern medical equipment still in sick bay.
Yeah,
So like Mbinga takes a little medical scanner and is like constantly scanning people, trying to figure out, is it me or is it them? Is it me or is it them? What's going on?
yeah. I think in general, it just seems like everyone is having fun there, like
Yeah.
wearing costumes and acting over the top. It's very fun, especially the actress who plays Lan, because
Right.
Lan,
Yeah.
like the character is, it's like very serious and straight laced and kind of angry most of the time. And now she's playing this annoying spoiled princess who's constantly whining. And it's very funny.
With a little pet dog.
Yeah,
So everything is really kind of turned on its head, and again, most pretty much everybody thinks they are these storybook characters, except
yeah,
Hemmer, who managed to fight off this weird like consciousness that tried to take over his this unknown entity, which they now figure is part of the nebula
yeah,
that they were surveying. And so, with the help of Hemmer, Mbinga not only finds his daughter, uh, you know, in the middle of thwarting the queen from finding his daughter.
yeah,
There's a couple of little fight scenes that are hilarious. Um, and then with the help of Hemmer, he also is able to communicate with the entity. Um, and this is where it gets a little more serious because the entity talks about having sensed Rukia, even though she was in the buffer, in the transporter,
yeah,
having sensed her and Rukia's loneliness, which matches the loneliness of the entity. And Rukia seems to be magically or like healed of her terminal illness, but the entity says it's only while we're in this fantasy and while she's with me that she is, no longer sick. And if you leave this place and take her with you, she will die.
yeah,
And so your choice is to take her and leave, or you can let her join with me and leave her behind, but she will essentially never die. She will be healthy and she will have me, and so on. And so Mbinga is really challenged to make um, to let his daughter go, not to make a
yeah.
choice, because at the end of the day the choice is his daughter's.
Yeah, but it's still a choice. I mean, she's a child.
He's cho-
She's a
he's
child.
choosing to let go, and she's
Yeah,
choosing to stay. But also it, yeah. The other choice from Mbinga is he can't let the crew stay in this fantasy forever. I mean,
yeah,
if it was just him, you get the sense that maybe, yes, he and his daughter would stay with the entity so that she can be free of sickness and he can be with his daughter. But in fact, the whole crew is trapped there
yeah,
and not able to live their own lives. And so he is a medical officer, cannot abide that.
yeah.
um, yeah, it's a very emotional ending to the episode. Um,
Yeah, but it's kind of undercut by the fact that a few seconds later,
yeah,
he suddenly gets visited by an older version of Rukia. I was like, yeah, time moves here differently.
yes.
So she has actually spent years here in her home time, and she's all grown up and she's happy. So he made the right decision. Um, it's kind of a weird choice to go. with that because
I mean, I take it as they realized they couldn't leave Mbinga as like a complete mess for the rest of the season because he would be. I
I mean,
mean,
yeah, but that's kind of that's kind of the point of this kind of
that
choice.
he has been putting off what should be fate for his daughter and knowing that he's going to lose his daughter. He's, been trying desperately to fight against that fate for her. It does happen. At some point he would have to grieve the loss of his daughter
Yeah, but
if she had not stayed with the entity and she had to die during during his time on the Enterprise.
I just felt this entire storyline got resolved way
Yeah.
too early. I mean, it's only the first season. We got introduced to this plot
Yeah.
line in episode 3, and by episode 8, it's pretty much resolved. So
Yeah, we were introduced to the plot line. We were given an almost like there was a potential option because the whole idea was that Mbinga was going to meet all these other strange new worlds and new races who might have better
yeah,
medical solutions in a way that could help his daughter. And so that's really what he was trying to. If he couldn't do it himself, he would find somebody who could. And
yeah,
then it comes in the form towards the end of the season in the form of a
yeah, but
non-corporal entity.
it's not really a cure because she's only well when she's under the influence of the entity. We
Yes.
already got a hint in episode 6, with Majalis, that there could possibly be a cure, that there
Yeah.
are
Yeah.
species who are advanced enough to have cures. And suddenly it's like, no, she has to stay with this entity. It's kind of weird. I think it's kind of weird. They could have continued with it for another season, I think, at least. And the choice then to have the entity be like, oh, here's your daughter all grown up, and she says, you made the right decision, so you don't have to feel bad about it.
Yeah. Well, let's keep in mind McCoy went through an incurable disease and a cure for it in one episode in the
Well,
in the
yeah, but this
original
is
series.
we're talking about the original series, right? And it was the third season. They knew they were not going to get another season.
I mean, it really isn't, in a sense, uncommon to have that.
Yeah, but like I said, this is we're talking about the original
Yeah.
series, where the episodes were extremely episodic. I don't think there was a single plot line, through plot line.
I'm like you. I was not expecting the end to be that she would come back immediately and be like, "Don't feel guilty. You made the right choice. I'm happy."
Yeah,
And he got to see her grown up and looking like her mother, so on and so forth. I was fully prepared to be crying at the end of the episode and left crying.
yeah,
And feeling bad for Mbinga, who would therefore be grieving the loss of his daughter, and possibly feeling guilty that was the
yeah,
only solution he came upon, and it separated him from her.
yeah. But because it was so quick, it didn't feel like it was the only solution.
No.
It felt like that's the solution you found right now.
Yeah.
That's why I think they could have put it up for another season, and then in the next season, maybe he would have encountered a few other species with advanced technology,
Yeah.
and he would have tried other things. And when none of those worked, then he could have come upon this kind of entity and had to make a tough choice and stick with it.
Mm-hmm.
And it felt very unsatisfying.
Well,
To
I
me.
think we'll see what they do with him being his character, because now we're going to see him not under the
Yeah.
pressure, under this great pressure to find a cure for his daughter. We're probably going to get to see him more relaxed and more in his element. I
Yeah,
hope,
I mean,
unless they set him to the side completely, which would be a mistake.
yeah, I hope so. I really hope they aren't going to just forget he exists now,
Yeah.
but he doesn't have a plotline of his own. But yeah, I have to say this plotline of Binga's daughter felt very unsatisfying to me.
Yeah. Okay, so shall we move on?
Yeah, episode 9, All Those Who Wander. Um, this surprised me because it felt like a serious finale, but it wasn't the finale. The final. It was like the season final. It was the one before, and it surprised me for a few reasons. Oh, let's talk about the general plotline.
First off, it does feel like it's a finale because we come in with Uhura talking about how her cadet assignment is over. And it
Yeah,
seems like they're celebrating the leaving of the cadets.
yeah.
Yeah.
Basically, the Enterprise is going to explore why a different ship,
The
what's
Peregrine.
his name,
Mm-hmm.
Peregrine, basically crashed and all of its crew is dead. Or, well, they hope not all of it is dead, but they're going to look for survivors. But it seems like all of the crew is dead. It crashed on this very cold planet. Um, so Pike and Uhura and basically all the bridge crew, all the main cast, goes on the planet to look at the ship, see what happened to it.
And the cadets. They're like, Pike's like, oh yeah, I know they're getting ready to leave, but let's give them one last adventure.
Yeah, famous last words.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and of course on the ship, what they find out is that there are not a lot of survivors. They find like one girl and one alien. But what they really find out is that the ship was attacked by Gorn. Not just by Gorn, but by Gorn eggs that were laid inside people, and and the
Hatched.
eggs hatched inside the people and burst out of their chest, and the Gorn hatchlings started killing people. It's basically Alien in Star Trek, the movie
Yes.
Alien in Star
I,
Trek.
I put that in a. I circled that many times in my notes.
Yeah,
At some point, I started watching through my fingers because I was like, we have gone right into sci fi horror movie territory. Basically, with the little Gorn hatchlings popping, like actually like
yeah,
eating their way out of the alien's body.
yeah,
The whole ship is dark and there's multiple of them hiding around every corner, and they're very, even the babies will kill you
yeah.
as soon as they're hatched. It's very terrifying, to be
It
honest.
is. It's very much a horror episode. Everyone is on edge. They're all afraid of those baby Gorn who are roaming around trying to eat them, basically. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
it's very intense. Of course, the ensign, the new ensign dies.
Well, the ensign just promoted to lieutenant.
Yeah,
Yeah, he's fodder.
yeah, yeah. All of the one-off characters that come over are basically red shirts. Um, but yeah, and eventually, of course, Sam Kirk is also there.
I was
We
gonna say he
remember he
returned
exists. Yeah,
for an
he returned.
episode.
Yeah. Um. So yeah, we have a horror episode. They're trying to capture the Gorn. They're trying to survive. Um.
They learn a lot of things about the Gorn. One, that the Gorn are invisible to their sensors.
Yeah.
They expel venom, which later turns out to be the very thing that infects the host or infects the person. So that, basically eggs form in them and then hatchlings explode out of them.
Yeah.
They even say that like Hemmer, can't mentally sense the presence of the Gorn, so they are truly like dark. Um,
Yeah.
and that the Gorn hate the cold, so they need a warm environment to
Yeah.
sit. And that the Gorn are very aggressive. They will actually kill each other in a fight for dominance, and so the one
Yeah.
that will be left will be like the alpha, the most dominant, and then they will proceed to hunt down the rest of everybody else who are prey. So
Yeah.
it's all very horrifying.
It
So
is.
everything Alon's been alluding to, talking about the breeding planet, the captives being used as like food for the Gorn hatchlings and being hunted down. Just the sense that the Gorn eggs are put into the prey's body, like all
Yeah.
those horrible things you've been hearing about, you kind of now get to see in action.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting. They really do make the Gorn like total
Yeah.
monsters. Like I don't know if they actually can make them seem more rational after this because everything we've seen so far of the Gorn have been of them being complete monsters.
Yeah. And the thing is, the not even the full, like the half mature, like Gorn, baby Gorn or whatever. The like even the last one left that you finally get to see, like actually visually see when it chases La'an and then gets frozen. Um,
Yeah,
that I mean that is not even a representation of what the adult version must look like. But then you have to think to yourself, wait, this is a spacefaring race. Like,
yeah,
why do you make them look so monstrous and but then also say that they're so advanced? And so really they're like
threat.
the ultimate threat. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's like taking that thing that animal, that vicious animal you might be scared of, and then making them so intelligent they can actually rival your intelligence and manipulate technology in a way to even chase you across the stars. It's just crazy. Like,
yeah, it is.
it makes them seem unreasonable too. Like,
Yep.
they are nothing but about taking other prey and using them for their own means.
Yeah, they're kind of like an animalistic version of the Borg, as I said.
Yeah.
They're driven by instincts, but they're also very intelligent, and they're ruthless, and it's very hard to beat them.
But what I try to remember is it seems like humans or humanoids can't communicate with them and or have
Yeah,
not been able to, even though like they may have figured out how the Gorn communicate. So no one's actually tried to have a conversation with them. Um, yeah. And I mean, they're making it sound like even if you had a conversation, they would just, tell you to surrender because they're going to kill you anyway. But at the same time,
yeah,
yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting.
it is.
Because it's like taking that impression from Arena, where you see what looks like the big Gorn lizard, and knowing that like Kirk feels like he can't talk to him, and but yet they're pitted against each other, and then realizing that the Gorn can talk to him, that they can communicate, and then they, even though they still fight, like that was the turning point, I think.
Yeah, I said it before when we talked about the first few episodes. I don't like this direction
Yeah,
because Arena is my favorite episode of the original series, and part of it is because of the subversion of this trope that the Gorn looks like a monster, and they are aggressive in this episode. Even after they start communicating, the Gorn
yeah,
remains aggressive.
yeah.
But also, there's this notion of the Gorn thinks we attack them, and they have a reason to think that.
Exactly. They're like, you came into
And
our home territory.
yeah, and you try to take over a planet that we see as ours, so of course it would be aggressive to you. And at the end, Kirk is like, yeah, I don't like. He was aggressive, but also I can see his point of view. We can talk this out. And so far, Stranger World seems to say, no, we can't reason with them. They are complete monsters.
They're heedless of like whoever territory they're in. They're just gonna invade and take prey as they see fit. Like
Yeah,
these are the actions of a race that cannot be reasoned with.
yeah, and also it makes the Gorn hypocrites because the Gorn in Arena was very angry that he invaded his territory, but the Gorn in Strange New Worlds always like takes over aliens outside of their territory.
Exactly. So they seem like
Yeah,
basically an invading race. Yeah, they are. Is very much akin to like a Borg type
yeah,
villain. It's I agree. I think it's disappointing because I even remember you remember in Abrams' verse where Bones makes that comment like having to deliver like octuplets, like Gorn octuplets. He's like those little bastards bite, like when he was like
yeah,
helping birth them. But now this whole retcon like makes you think, well, gosh, how were they birthed? Did he like have to cut open another human and take them out? Like they don't
yeah.
look just like they would bite you. Like they'll like rip you apart
They'll eat you.
immediately.
Yeah, they'll eat you. They're just bite.
So it just like I don't know. I think it just makes them way too vicious to
It,
be handled, even in like a
it,
birthing situation.
it makes them one-dimensional, I
Yeah.
think, which is disappointing. And the great twist of this episode
Mm.
is, of course, that we lost Hammer, which is disappointing for a few reasons. One, because I was starting to really like him, and two, because he was the only original character on the show.
Yeah.
um,
He was,
yeah,
yeah, he was actually, I enjoyed his character. He was very like gruff and whatnot, but he made comments like he's not really there to do harm to anybody. He
Yeah.
joins the Federation or joins Starfleet because he believes in protecting the values of the Federation. I don't know, like you got to see him in action with like his telepathy. You got to see him
Yeah.
like coaching and almost mentoring Uhura and trying to help her figure out if she still wants to be part of Starfleet, because even in this episode, she's still not sure where her
Where she
place
wants to go.
is in
Yeah.
Starfleet or what she wants to do.
Yeah, his relationship with Uhura was very well done, and I really liked
Mm-hmm.
them together. Their scenes were very well done. And it is disappointing to see him go. Yeah.
I almost wonder if they got rid of him because he's the chief engineer in order to put Scotty in.
Yeah, it could be. Also, I didn't know this before I watched the show. I only found it later, but his actor is actually blind, which is kind of rare. You don't see a lot of blind actors on TV.
Oh, that's nice. I did not know that. I love it.
Yeah, so that's it's sad that we have to see him go. Yeah.
Yeah. My other comment here would be Sam Kirk. Okay, so this is
Yeah.
like the second time we get to see him.
The third, I think, the
Third,
third time.
but you know, we don't see him a
Yeah.
lot. We don't really we
Yeah.
don't get any sense for who he is. But in this episode, as you would expect, he's freaking out a bit, knowing that they're stuck on this ship with these like alien things. They're gonna eat them.
Yeah.
And you know, Pike, who seems to know him, of course, makes this comment to Spock that like, yeah, he's tougher than he looks. But Sam is the one who kind of like comes at Spock at one point when he's really stressed out and you know, and challenges him like, why are you being so logical in this terrifying situation? Don't you feel anything? He even calls him a pointy-eared computer. And I was like, wait a
Yeah.
minute, did they just give him bone scissor-all? It was only for a brief second, but it made me pause.
It was weird. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I can't say that Sam Kirk really leaves a lot of impressions so
No.
far.
I mean, and
Yeah.
honestly, I don't know why they put him in the show unless they're going to
Yeah.
planning to do something with him. But at this point,
I
he
had no
doesn't
idea.
seem like a part of the main bridge crew.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be a part of the main bridge crew, but it really doesn't seem to contribute anything, significant to the plot anytime.
I thought that he would be because in the first episode, like Pike requested him to join the Enterprise,
Yeah,
so I would have expected him to be more present.
that's true. Me too.
Yeah.
Well, we can move on to the next episode.
The final episode, yeah.
The final episode is very interesting. It's a very interesting choice for a final episode of a season.
Equality of Mercy.
Equality of Mercy. This is kind of, I think we've seen things like that on other shows before, on the Star Trek
Mhm.
shows before. It's a very direct tribute to an episode of the original series.
Yes.
In this episode, Pike basically meets a person, a kid who is destined to be one of the people he knows he's going to sacrifice his body to save in the future. And he kind of tries to write him a letter to try and change the future. And then he gets a visit from future Pike, from the future where he succeeds, who tells him that because he did this, the entire timeline is very messed up. And then we get to see why. Pike basically finds himself 10 years, 15 years in the future.
Pause. Pause. Can we talk about how he gets to the future?
All right.
Apparently, Future Pike was sent back by some Klingon monks who hold this
that's
time
part of
crystal.
Discovery. Yeah, that's part of Discovery. That's a reference to Discovery.
Let me just say, I've not seen that part of Discovery, and I had a huge question mark. I was like, Klingon monks and a time crystal. Well, you know, it is Trek. Okay, I accept it.
Yeah. That's how he saw his fate in the first place.
Once again, Discovery comes back to bite me.
Yeah. So he goes to the future and he finds himself basically in the plot of the original episode, on the original series episode, Balance of Terror. Now, we already had an episode that is very reminiscent of Balance of Terror, so it's very interesting to see it done again.
Yeah.
I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a great episode. It's usually the first episode I show people who I want to get into the original series because it is an excellent episode. Basically, the entire episode is like, what if instead of Kirk and crew, it was Pike and his crew who dealt with the Romulans in this episode.
And keep in mind, A Balance of Terror is supposedly the first time the Federation sees the Romulans after 100 years. They've sort of been in this Cold War for 100 years. There's a neutral zone that between the Federation and the Romulan Empire that should not be crossed. And we come upon an instance where there several outposts along the neutral zone on the Federation side have been attacked. No one's really knows who it is, and then suddenly there's a glimpse of what might be a Romulan ship attacking an outpost and going into the neutral zone, and then Pike and crew decide to follow.
Yeah.
And that's in keeping with like the plot of Balance of Terror.
Yeah. In Deep Space Nine, we had the episode "The Troubles and Tribulations,"
Yeah.
which harkens back to the Trouble with Tribbles. This was like a comedic episode that did very interesting technological things, like it melded the original series footage of Trouble with Tribbles with
I loved
actors of Deep Space Nine. It was very well done. This is not this kind of episode. It doesn't include footage from the original series. All it does is basically really put the characters of Strange New Worlds in this scenario.
Yeah. It is a retelling.
Yeah.
With different characters inserted in different roles of this episode. And yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Trouble with Tribbles like remake in Deep Space Nine, because that one they actually use clips, like you got to see like Cisco in the background looking at Kirk, like chastising his crew for getting in a fight with the Klingons. That was very clever. This one did put me off my game a little bit. So continue.
Yeah. So basically the plot, it kind of follows similar beats, but then of course I think it's interesting, we do get to see how Pike handles things differently from Kirk and how that would affect the timeline. Kirk himself makes an appearance, which is also interesting. At this point in time, he is a captain still, but he's a captain of a different ship, not the Enterprise.
And so we literally get to compare their captaining styles. Not just, by knowing what Kirk is like, but seeing Kirk make decisions and Pike make decisions and then argue over why they didn't agree on the same decision.
Yeah. It basically boils down to the fact that Pike is a lot less gun happy than Kirk is, shall we say. Kirk basically matched the Romulan militaristic energy, and engaged them in a fight before they reached their own side. Pike refused to do it and basically started a war between the Romulans and the Federation.
Yeah.
So
it goes wrong. But the one thing that kind of is constant is they kept the characterization of the Romulan commander of the vessel they're chasing the same. So now his cohorts or his sub-commanders might be a little different, slightly different, but he is basically a commander who's tired of fighting, tired of war. He's the one who could possibly be reasoned with, but was supposed to be like an intellectual match to Kirk in A Balance of Terror. And I appreciated that. I actually appreciated them not going too crazy with the Romulan commander, because he was a good character.
Yeah, he's a good. They kept the same characters. Only in this case, he gets superseded by his underlings because Kirk won't engage him in a fight.
Yeah.
Kirk is there, and Kirk does tell Pike that he thinks he's doing the wrong thing. He thinks they should engage them in a fight. They should destroy them before they reach their own side and can, report intelligence to their side, because it might start a war, and he's proven correct, of course.
Yeah.
So I think it's an interesting episode. It is an interesting episode because it reminds me a lot of like fan fiction. in the sense in a what if sort of fan fiction.
Yeah.
When you take characters and put them in a different scenario. Basically, this: what if it was Pike and not Kirk who was in command of the Enterprise during
Yeah.
Balance of Terror?
And more to the point, we said that Pike starts a war with the Romulans. In the process of that, Kirk gets destroyed.
Yeah,
Spock practically gets destroyed. He's severely injured, basically to the
yeah,
point that Pike would be, or Pike knows that he will be if he chooses to accept his fate, saving the children from that accident.
yeah,
Essentially, his decision takes out what would be like the two main characters from the original series. And but then Pike's future self comes back to further say, well, this war with the Romulans that started because of your decision is still going on, and primarily because the person who would have brokered peace with the Romulans was Spock, and Spock took your place in having that severe accident that crippled him.
yeah.
So,
So yeah, and so I think I think it's a good final episode eventually, because we started the season on Pike kind of having to deal with knowing his own future
yeah,
and he knowing it's terrible. And in this episode, he's basically forced to accept it. And he does accept it. When he sees that, trying to avoid it will have terrible consequences, he accepts that is his burden.
mm-hmm.
He has to the future has to play out as he sees it playing out. Otherwise, more terrible things will come.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really the recap of that. But can we
Yeah,
talk about the little things in the episode that were
yeah, yeah.
interesting? So Pike goes to Sam Kirk before he even meets
Kirk. Yeah,
James Kirk and says,
yeah,
what's your brother like? And Sam is like, my younger brother is kind of off the rails. He's very stubborn and he doesn't mind bending the rules, and he
yeah,
basically describes like his kind of cowboy style, the Kirk cowboy style. And
yeah.
then Pike looks concerned.
That's
But then
true.
Sam goes, "Oh no, well no, he's still a great captain. Like he's earned his position. Like you can trust him.
Yeah,
He just doesn't do things the way you do them."
yeah. Were you disappointed that James Kirk wasn't played by the guy who plays Sam Kirk but without a mustache?
That actually would, to be honest, that would have had
Very.
me rolling.
Yeah,
But I feel like if they intend to bring Kirk occasionally back into the show, like for cameos or whatever, then it wouldn't suit them to keep having Sam Kirk's actor come on, come with a mustache or whatever. Like hilarious.
yeah,
Anyway, some other things. So you know how in like a Balance of Terror, when we first see the Romulans, I don't remember the navigator's name, but remember they see the Romulans and recognize that they look like Vulcans, and then he, makes some comment to Spock, and Kirk is like, "We don't have bigotry on the bridge."
yeah,
Well, that role is actually taken over by Ortega. So Erica, sees the Romulans, and she seems to at this point in time have a real maybe like a chip on her shoulder about the Romulans. I don't know why, but she just seems
yeah,
aggressively anti-Romulan. And so when they see that Romulans look like Vulcans, and everybody's really shocked. Even Spock is shocked, of course, in keeping
yeah,
with that. When they go back to talk about it later, Ortega's the one who's like, "Is there something we should know, Spock?" And he's like, "I'm as surprised as you are." I thought that was interesting because it seemed like Pike and Ortega really got along well in this season. They seem to have a similar sense of humor.
that's true.
And then
Yeah,
I felt tension there, I guess, for like the first time. But then again, this is a future situation.
yeah,
We learned that Una is basically had been arrested at some point and was locked up because of the secret.
Yeah. Also, we forgot to mention last episode. On the ship, the only survivor they end with, the Gorn ship,
Right.
the only survivor at the end is a child,
Yeah.
and who's traumatized in a very similar manner to Laan. And so Laan takes the child and they go off,
Mm-hmm.
basically kind of to find help for the child.
Yeah. So La'an takes a
Um,
leave of absence from Starfleet duty, basically.
yeah. And in this episode that is set in the future, Pike encounters Laan's ship again.
Mm-hmm. And La'an is serving on the Farragut, which is captained by James T. Kirk.
Yeah.
Spock is number one. Is basically the first officer now on the
Yeah.
Enterprise. And we get a very short glimpse of Scotty.
We
I
get
think
his
we
voice.
get
We
his
get his voice.
voice and his arm, and
Yeah.
his and we have to assume it's Scotty because it's a Scottish accent.
Yeah. I mean, I think Spock says Mr.
Maybe he
Scott, so
does.
we know it's him. And do we see Uhura as the communication officer?
We do. We see Uhura's on the Enterprise. Even, of course, Pike is surprised by that as well because in his time she's, a cadet who's probably just left his ship. So yeah, and to be clear, Pike is precisely 7 years ahead in the future. It's like
Yeah.
2266, so it is literally about the time that Kirk taking command of the Enterprise in the original
Yeah.
series. Yep.
Yeah. So this is the first season of. And before I forget, the episode ends. Pike, um, accepts his future. He doesn't try to change it, and then he gets a visit from the admiral that we see in the first episode.
Yeah.
And it turns out Starfleet Command got word that number one is an Illyrian,
Yeah.
and she gets arrested. And that's how the season ends.
Yeah. So we are left with a very small cliffhanger.
Yeah, I mean, we are left kind of with a lot of empty spaces in the crew,
Yeah. Lalon is gone. Una's arrested. Hemmer
and
is
Hammer is dead,
dead.
and who are left
And
because
who are
it was
left?
the end of the year. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it will be interesting to see what happens next season, whether they'll be back or whether their spaces will be taken up by different characters.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
When we were introduced to Uhura, and she was a cadet, were you really expecting that maybe she could just be a one season character? I mean, I don't know
I
if
don't
she
think so.
is, but
I don't think so. I think she'll be back.
you think she'll be back?
Yeah.
Okay.
What do you think?
What do you think they'll say? Why do you think they'll say she's back? Is she, now that she's gotten to rotate through different departments, maybe she decides to stay in Starfleet, but then she gets to do her actual first assignments as an ensign
Yeah.
on the Enterprise?
Yeah, I think so. I think it will be something like that.
Okay. Is she ever going to get to serve on another ship?
I have no idea. I mean, I think maybe I can see her not being there on the second season, and then on the third season she's back as an ensign.
Right. To me, that would feel better from a continuity standpoint, because I feel like it was a privilege of hers as a cadet to get to do that on the Enterprise, to be on the Enterprise on the flagship, and so maybe just to make sure she gets a well-rounded experience, she gets to serve in the lower decks on a lesser ship.
Yeah.
Maybe it literally gets a second priority ship. Like the Cerritos.
I mean, yeah, but I mean, even the Enterprise needs some ensigns, right?
I mean, they do.
Yeah.
They do. But I don't think it'd make any sense for her to serve out her
entire career.
Yeah, the entire
yeah.
7 years should be on the Enterprise, and then Kirk takes over, and then she's got another however many years. That's all. I mean, don't get me wrong. Spock was supposedly on under Pike for 10 years in the original series, the full duration. But Spock is he's a lieutenant commander at this point.
Yeah, I think so.
He's a few ranks up from A cadet
Yeah,
soon to be ensign.
yeah,
Soda, you and I did a captain comparison podcast, and we talked about what would be the difference between like a Captain Pike and a Captain Kirk. And Strange New Worlds in this last episode gave us that like comparison on screen.
yeah.
Did that live up to your expectations?
Well, when we talked about it, I already watched Strange New World as far as it went. But I mean, I watched Discovery season two and
Right.
all. Um, but I think I think back then, because you haven't watched it, I kind of based it on the pilot, and in the pilot, Pike was very different from
Mm-hmm.
the Pike we see in Discovery and Strange New Worlds. He's he's more contemplative. He's more sad. He's a
Mm-hmm.
little bit of an emo. Um, but yeah, I did think he would be less inclined to fight than Kirk. Kirk is more, as I said, he's more gun happy, more trigger happy. He's more, he takes more chances
Yeah.
than Pike, I think.
One thing I forgot to mention is I'm trying to remember what episode it was, but Pike's nickname is Boy Scout. So
Yeah,
I think that kind of summarizes how people view him as a like a rule follower, and a captain who will like come to the rescue though.
yeah. He's like, I think the best way of describing is like he has like he has a command style that is very similar to Picard, but not as formal as Picard.
No, he actually hosts his main crew in his quarters often for food
Yeah,
and
that actually reminds me more of Cisco.
yeah,
He's like a cross between Cisco and Picard because he has the same sensibilities of Picard in the sense that he's very diplomatic. He's more for talking. He's less for action,
yeah.
but he's very personable with his crew, like Cisco.
Mm-hmm. And I did find it entertaining that when he realized they called him Boy Scout, that he decided to go on like the away mission because
Yeah,
normally he doesn't. You see that most
yeah,
of the time he trusts in his crew to go and be able to pull off whatever mission they're on. And so he's not always on the landing party unless it's a critical situation.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I mean I think we've gone through all the episodes. Yeah.
I guess my last question is, well, not my last question, but overall, I think we both agree that this is a good show. We enjoyed it,
Yeah.
right?
I agree.
Uh, where do you rank it in terms of the new Star Trek shows? Of what you've seen, of course.
Of what I've seen, I like it. To me it's my number 2.
Your number two.
Yeah, so Lower Decks is still the better of the new Star Trek shows because
Hmm.
it is humorous and funny following the new ensigns and their new characters, and I just
Yeah,
really enjoy that. Um,
yeah,
I didn't ever personally think I might rank an animated show like at the top, but for what it is, it's really, really good.
yeah.
However, the thing that I really like about Strange New Worlds is they went back to the episodic format.
I
So it's
agree.
a close to my number 1,
Mm,
but it doesn't rank above Lower Decks for me. There are. I mean, I'm not saying it's a perfect show. We've talked about the things that we don't particularly like about it, like the treatment of the Gorn. The just the way they didn't use new characters and they do some. They rehash some old material, so they're not always original. But it just gives me the right feeling and the feeling that I really missed for Star Trek show, which was telling it like a self-contained story that leaves you with a good feel for the characters and how they're developing as a family on the ship, and it also might leave you with a sense of hope and a moral of the story. Now, I will tell you, Soda, we talked about this in our other podcast. We reviewed the first two. One of your main concerns was there was going to be like a preaching tone
yeah,
to this show. I was very cognizant of that, I think, as I watched the rest of the episodes. I feel like it was toned down more.
Yeah, I agree. It wasn't preachy.
It was not as preachy as it was in the first two episodes. Maybe that was just the situation or the circumstances in which each of the episodes aired, like their storylines. So maybe
Yeah.
that'll come back if they had more of a like, oh, trying to get a new race into the Federation. It might
Yeah.
come back, but I'm glad it wasn't super preachy.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. So I think the last question I have is what is your favorite and least favorite episodes?
I've been thinking about this hard. So my gut tells me that the Elysian Kingdom number 8 was my favorite.
Oh,
I will tell you why. It's not because of that troublesome ending that it had. We said it was like a cop out, right? With the emotional
yeah.
payoff of Mbinga dealing with his daughter's illness. Um, if they'd not had that last scene, this would have been a really great episode to me.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it was early on, and it wrapped up the plot too early because it was campy. It was what I love about Star Trek. I mean, you took what I really love about the original series, which is just some of the nonsensical humor, like the actors having a good time, not playing themselves. Like, I don't know. To me, I was really happy to just have a funny episode where they're all dressed up and think they're in a fantasy, and of course, it is some almost godlike entity that gets to manipulate reality.
Yeah.
And they have to figure out what it is, and so taking away that whole terminal illness type thread to that, which I did think added to the story. I mean, it certainly made it more emotional for Mbinga, and I really like his character. So this, was an Mbinga episode, and I was for
Yeah.
it. But I was just really, really happy to see them dressed up. That's why it was my favorite. And I know
That's a valid reason.
I know that was. It seems like a silly reason because if you're talking about a true track moral of the story type episode, you might pick something else. But I'm just happy to see some TOS vibes going on really strong with the silliness.
Nice.
It just
Yeah.
means the show itself won't always take itself seriously, and they're willing to do
Nice.
little funny things like that, just like other Star Trek shows have done,
Yeah.
without apology.
Yeah.
So,
I understand this.
mm-hmm.
Yeah, I do enjoy. They had several campy
Yeah,
episodes this season, and I'm very glad for it. I think it has been missing from the recent Star Trek shows.
yeah. A second close, of course, was the Serene Squall. Was a second close favorite, just because it was the Captain Angel. They were a very intriguing character. End up being a spy. Um, they just got to do their thing where the crew was had to get out of a hostile situation, and they did it by playing tricks. This is just normal Enterprise crew stuff. Um,
Yeah.
so I enjoyed that part of it. But my least favorite,
Yeah. That is interesting. What is your least favorite?
don't judge me too harshly for this. So my least favorite was number 4, um, Memento Mori, because it felt sort of like a filler episode just to play up the Gorn conflict.
Nice.
We'd already heard about the Gorn, and I know in a normal show that's not like an episodic show but has a plot thread, you would then, the next logical step would then be to have an episode where you have an encounter with them. So you actually get to see, yeah, they're in your space, they're around, they're a threat. And then, of course, you would go into another episode where you had them actually come face to face with them, in a real dangerous situation. That was, how do I put it? I expected them to do that, and yet I didn't really want them to do that. So, in other shows, I like being introduced to villains. I liked A Balance of Terror, which technically this could be a this could is supposed to be a similar type of introduction to a villain episode like A Balance of Terror. But I didn't like the way it was done, and yeah, it just didn't feel like the rest of the episodes. It just,
I see.
I mean, it had its good moments. And here's the thing, I like La'an's character. And
Yeah.
I understand it's a La'an episode, and it's her like facing her worst nightmare and knowing that it might be out there, and she's going to eventually have to deal with not only her trauma but like figure out like the fact that she wants vengeance, that she does see them as an enemy that took away everything from her, and she wants to get some type of revenge at some point. But she also wants to run away because they're horrible.
Yeah.
There was no moral of the story for that one.
I see. Mhm.
Sorry, it's hard to explain. It's just, oh, and also
No,
like
it's okay.
the slingshotting around the black hole just made me roll my eyes. Let's be honest, it's been done
Oh,
so
yeah.
many times in
Yeah.
Abrams' verse too. I mean,
Yeah.
practically. So I was like, thank God they didn't slingshot around into the past or the future, because that's usually what happens when they do
Yeah.
something crazy like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, so that one for me, I would probably not watch again.
Mm.
Wouldn't be my first choice for sure.
All right. I see.
So now I have to ask you the same question. So, what's your favorite and your least favorite?
Yeah. My least favorite, I'm sorry to say, it is Delusion Kingdom.
Okay.
I do enjoy the campiness. I do enjoy, them playing with the costumes and the silliness. But it felt like such a disappointing ending to Mabenga's story.
Mm-hmm.
It soured the whole thing for me, both because it ended the story far too quickly for my taste, and both because of the last scene, as we said, of him
Yeah.
just not even having to live with his choice, just immediately getting told, "Yeah, you made the right choice."
Yeah.
It just soured the whole thing for me.
Can we just say I really ignored that? All I think about is like the stupid like little dressed up Enterprise. It looks like, and Spock with his longer hair and his quote villainous
Yeah.
attitude. Uhura as like the badass evil queen.
Yeah.
I enjoyed watching them play like they were in a fairy tale. It was great.
That's valid, but I really,
Yeah.
really hope they don't forget about Mabenga's existence now that he doesn't
Yeah.
have the whole story of his daughter.
Yeah.
Because the ending, I think, it was very disappointing.
Yeah.
My favorite.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
just want to say one more thing. It's very common to do a storyline where a character loses somebody, or they have to accept that they're going to lose somebody. So that kind of storyline to me is kind of near and dear. Like,
Yeah.
accepting that if you love something, you let them go, even if that means losing them forever.
Yeah.
And even more so for a parent-child relationship, because it's always a horrible situation to be in. So
Yeah.
I was invested in like what Amigo would choose to do, and so I didn't like the very last part where she came back, because but I feel like
Yeah.
they did that because they had to at least help him get over the guilt piece of it more quickly so that he can continue to be on the show, because I feel like he could potentially be crippled for a while emotionally from that kind of choice. So I feel like they did that for expediency's sake, and I do hope they don't forget him.
Yeah. I feel like they could have resolved it better if it, like I said, if they had waited another season
Yeah.
and had a few more episodes where he had tried to cure her and didn't succeed, so he was really at the end of his rope.
Yeah.
And then he would have felt less guilty maybe about his choice, because he would be like, well,
Yeah.
I've tried everything else and nothing worked.
I mean, this really well could have been an episode in a later season. I mean, they
Yeah.
were trying to express how exhausted he was and how he did feel he was at the end of his rope. And it did come too soon as a narrative in the show. But
Yeah.
I was expecting an episode like this to address Mbiga's situation at some point. I just like that they did it with a stupid fantasy. Like
Yeah.
a story that he was telling his daughter over and over. I thought that was a very sort of sentimental way to handle that issue.
I just felt
Getting.
like it really dropped the ball on the story.
I love that we're so like divergent. I mean, I agree with you. They dropped the
Yeah.
ball in some sense, but yeah, I still enjoyed it. I'm
Yeah,
perverse.
that's
What can I say?
well, that's your choice. Everybody likes a different thing.
Yeah. Okay, so what's your
Yeah.
favorite?
My favorite is the Serene Squall because
Yeah.
I think it gave us everything. It
Yeah.
gave us a great villain.
Yep.
It gave us camp in the pirates. The
Yeah.
pirates were very campy. It gave us action. It gave us some really emotional bits. With Spock, with his choice to make, with the Pring, with Chapel. It basically gave us everything I wanted. That's everything I want from a Star Trek episode. I really enjoyed this episode, and it gave us Cyborg.
Yeah, I was gonna say and Cybok, right? Yeah.
And it gave us Cyborg. Yeah.
Yeah. So other than my predilection for like silly fantasy worlds, if we had not had the Elysian episode in here in this show in this season, I would have picked the
Yeah.
Serene Squall.
It was a great episode, I think.
For me, the villain captain, they really made that for me. With
Yeah.
the acting was on point.
Yeah. They were very over the top and very fun, and yeah, I enjoyed
Let's be honest, I always looking for the trick. At some point, I was almost convinced that they were trying to do the right thing, but in the back of my mind, I was still thinking this can't be right. Like there is something we don't know about yet that's gonna pop up, and like, is it this person? I had a small doubt, but every time they would talk, it would kind of assuage my doubt. So they were convincing even the viewer, not just Spock and the crew, but like the viewer, that they might be legitimate. And of course they weren't.
Yeah.
It was good. I like being tricked. I like being tricked. So,
Yeah. So, yeah, what?
we're probably going to come up on time here, but really quick, what do you think's going to be in the next season?
The next season? I hope they continue the episodic nature. I don't think the Una arresting story is going to take too much time.
Mm-hmm.
I hope it will be resolved in an episode or two. I think Laan wouldn't be back on the ship, but we would encounter her here and there. Like there'll be guest appearances in several episodes.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think Scotty will come next season.
Yeah. All those things. I agree with all those things. I also think they will continue to build the friendship between Chapel and Spock.
Yeah.
I hope they make more use of Sam Kirk. It seems like a waste to put him in there as just a name drop.
Also, they said that Kirk will have more appearances next season.
And I do expect that Captain Kirk will come back for some appearances. For sure. I do expect that. There's no reason not to work hard to find the right character if you're not going to have him return. Or the right actor for the job. I'm very deeply sad we lost Hemmer.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure how I feel about getting Scotty as a replacement so soon, even though I know technically he would have been on the ship as long as Spock. Almost as long as Spock. So it is the right time for him to come into the show, but all I'm thinking is, are they going to ask Simon Pegg to do it?
No, they're not. I don't think they will.
So it'll be interesting to see who that plays that role. Whoever rotates like it through the crew, like some of the main characters that stay on the show, I want to see them become even more of a family than they are, because a lot of them do seem pretty close. Like I mentioned, like Pike and Ortega they've known each other a while. They get along.
Chapel and Ortega seem to be friends.
Yep, they do. We didn't mention that, but Chapel apparently has a fear of commitment.
Yeah, which is interesting because she has a fiancé in the original series.
Yeah, I was actually wondering if they were going to mention it's because her fiancé like disappeared, and she felt abandoned, and then therefore she like now had commitment phobia. But they never mentioned Roger, so I put it aside. Did you catch that comment from Ortega about Chapel dating a gal.
I did, but I felt like they left it ambiguous on purpose
Yeah,
because then Chapel says that it was actually a mistake, and you kind of don't know if it was a mistake in the sense of I wasn't really dating her, she thought I was, or a mistake is in something happened in the relationship.
yeah. Okay.
So yeah, I felt it was
So I'm
ambiguous.
just curious to see like how they're going to build more canon material for the characters that we know. Um,
Yeah,
the biggest question mark is T'Pring and Spock, right? T'Pring and
yeah.
Spock seem to really care for each other and to really want their relationship to work out. I mean, they they're doing all the things you would expect a couple like in love to do to try to make it work. So, but then you had a hint where like Spock went out of his way to make it seem like he was having an affair with Nurse Chapel, and he actually thought maybe T'Pring might believe it. But then,
Yeah,
of
but
course, she comes back to like, oh, of course I didn't believe that. I know you. I know your character.
yeah.
But things like that makes you wonder, like, what's going to happen in the future that would put them that would ruin their relationship to the point that T'Pring would do what he is his worst nightmare and call like Kali Fee.
Well, you already see kind of the cracks starting to
There
form,
are
and I think
cracks, but they're trying so hard to mend them.
they are, but it doesn't always work.
Yeah,
And I think it's very smart in that way because they have several more years until they're
yeah.
at the point where they don't want anything to do with each other. So it's smart they're starting small, but you already see the cracks, I think, and they're just going to grow. They're not. They just they just can't bridge the differences.
Yeah, but it does, in a sense, make T'Pring a more likable character than
Yeah.
just what we saw in Amok Time and the original series. It makes her more. I hate to use the term like makes her more human, but because
Makes them more rounded, I
makes her
think.
more rounded and yeah. It's also
Yeah.
kind of funny like how awkward they are with each other sometimes. She
Yeah.
thinks she's doing something to like try to be more acclimated to his human side or and he's just like please don't. That makes me uncomfortable. Yeah, so there are some things that just leave you with questions. You know they're going to be coming in the next season. So there will be more to T'Pring and Spock, I think. More Chapel and Spock. Um I'll be interested to see what they're going to do with Pike now that he's accepted his fate. Is he
Yeah.
just going to be in general more relaxed because he just knows he's not going to die until that moment in the future in like 7 years? Like, is he just going to be like, sure, or is he going to be more risk taking? Who
I
knows?
don't think so. I don't think so.
Yeah,
Well, we're gonna continue watching and seeing where they go.
yeah, we will.
I think we should wrap this up.
Yeah,
Yeah, those were our thoughts on the first season of Strange New Worlds. Um, Overall, we both enjoyed it, right?
yeah,
And we are going to continue watching it when the next season drops, which will be in a year or so, I think. So until next time,
yes.
bye everybody.
Thank you. Bye.